Like to call the 1928 Building Committee meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, any public comment? Devin, do we have any hands raised out there?
We have one attendee, but no hands raised yet, so we'll give them a moment. Okay, want to give public comment? All right, seeing no hands.
Okay, we're going to go to D, new business, and we would like to introduce, and they will introduce themselves, Silver and Petroselli and Associates. So gentlemen, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourselves.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Stein. I'm a principal with Silver Petroselli and Associates. Chris Nardi, also a principal, acting as project manager and project architect for the project. It's fun to be sitting on this seat as some of you know, we designed the space. So having an opportunity to sit here looking outward. So it's that's a neat experience. So thanks for that. We both were unable to attend the interviews, but you did meet our partners who will be involved in the project. So you'll be seeing them as we sort of, go through the process going forward. We're excited to get started. We're excited to learn more about your group and individually, just learning about you and kind of how the project moved forward. There's a lot of information that we read, but we really want to start coming into a project like this. And you saw our experience on a few projects that are almost identical to this in terms of its overall concept. So we're very interested in kind of learning the tone and the tempo of the town, and really what that history is from 28. And I'm sure there's many people who went to school there, or family members went to school there, and what's the best way of repurposing a building. And hopefully you saw that, and I think you saw that from our presentation, and kind of our practice is that the restoration work that we do is really sustainable design. So keeping buildings and repurposing them, I think, is the best way of being stewards of the environment. And that's what these type of projects are the right way to go about it. It's all about compromise and what you can keep and what you can afford. And we're going to help guide you guys through that. So, we're excited to get started.
Excellent. Okay, so I think agenda item D2, I'd like to have Kathy and Kat just go over potentially our statement of needs and potentially what our next steps will be, and go over some of the survey results at this time. So Kat.
Thanks, Peter. And I know you guys have reviewed all this, so I'm going to kind of go at a high level just of the statement of needs for the building committee. So as you know that we had an ad hoc committee before this ad hoc committee to engage stakeholders and completed a town-wide survey to conduct a needs assessment on space needs of the town and if they can be satisfied by retaining and renovating the 1928 building. So after the ad hoc committee review, they found that the needs of the town are that town hall operations need more space and are inefficiently located in satellite offices across town. This includes departments in the existing town hall, probate offices, recreational offices, and social service offices. And just for your clarity, here, the probate offices, which are located here, that is one of the offices that we were talking about that potentially moving out. They're a state agency, but are located here. The recreational offices are not in the town buildings. They're scattered. That was another area that we thought could move them together. And the recreational offices are part of a larger division, which includes the social service offices and the social service offices are next door in the red building right on Monteith Drive. So our kind of thought process, and again, not knowing the space and how that actually works, was we thought potentially that the probate offices could move out of this building, the recreational offices and social service offices could move out of their satellite offices and move into the 1928 building. We have no idea if that actually works, but that was sort of our thought process, and that was the ad hoc committee's thought process. We also found through our space needs is that community use throughout town, there is a lack of space for community use, including but not limited to meeting space, event space, non-for-profit use, art and business and incubators use. And some of that information came from us here in the town, knowing that we need community space. Other things came from the townwide survey that came back to us about potentially art, potentially incubator space. I know, for an example, the food, is it called the food bank or the food pantry?
Pantry.
That's another example of someone that needs space. So these are kind of community use space. Oh, and then just going back to the first one about the town hall space, again, the Board of Education, who takes up a lot of this building, they are moving out, but the town space even here, we are in desperate need of space to spread out. And so, you know, a Rose, for instance, our economic development person is basically in a small closet over there, our registrars in. So again, even though people are moving out of the building, there's still a real big need for space, and whether it's office space, but also storage, closets for files, conference room space, things of that nature. So that came out very loud and clear. Gym space. We definitely do not have enough gym space town-wide for recreational basketball, for volleyball, potentially for pickleball. That's something that we have heard a lot about, but we don't have pickleball courts. Again, we share our gym space with the schools, and so it's a constant who's using the space and things of that nature. And also, I think we may have discussed, and I'm sure you've heard this, that the way we're set up and how the schools are set up, our buildings, because they're older, the school and the recreational programs like to be more separate than they actually are. And that's just come to different times of security and things of that nature. So schools, I think, inherently have become more tighter about the use of the spaces, because how the schools are set up, they don't have security and who's in the buildings and things like that. So as time has gone on, really the use of space in the schools existing, especially gym space, has become a battle that we don't have enough of it. And then the last item, it came on our statement of needs, is space for additional storage. Per records retention laws, files must be kept for long durations. Storage at the town hall is limited. Our new records facility at the water pollution control is rapidly filling up. And I think one of the things that we'll always try to have to, in our communications, what people don't, the average citizen doesn't realize that even though everyone talks about lack of paper, less paper, in a municipality, you still have to keep hard copies of almost everything. And our paper supply, it's not getting less, it's getting more, because a lot, yes, you can work on a program and get rid of some of it, but really the majority of records are kept. And so a lot of people say, why do you need more storage space? But as you know, we do need more storage space, and it's town-wide that we're really having problems with that. So this was the our ad hoc committee had come up with, these are the needs, what I'm calling the space needs, and the town council approved this statement of needs. And per our ordinance for how we do our buildings, that's the process that the council approves what the statement of needs are. And then what they do is they charge the building committee, and that's the next item quickly just to go through it, is that they establish a new building committee, which are these, this is our building committee, and they approve the charge is that the committee shall review the statement of needs, the community survey in the 1928 building, and the recommendations from the ad hoc building committee. The committee shall evaluate and make recommendations to the town council on two options. One is engage an architect to complete a conceptual design and a third-party cost estimator to provide preliminary pricing for the renovation of the 1928 as a standalone building. So that would be option one. Option two would be to be engaged an architect to complete a conceptual design and a third-party cost estimator to provide preliminary pricing for the renovation of 1928, the retention of 1952, 64, and 78 for the purpose of utilizing gym space with no immediate renovations. In addition, receive a range of preliminary cost estimates for a full renovation of the 1952, 64, and 78. And Devin, maybe just because we're going to talk about it, if you could put that on the screen, just what our colored, yeah.
And it should also be in that last page of that packet as well.
Yes, it's in your packet too. So this is the thing that we continually talk about. And then after the committee has evaluated their options, they shall present their recommendations to the town council for consideration. This should be completed no later than December 2022. So the thought is that we have two different options that you guys would be looking at for us. And then you'd come back to us and then we'd vet them and kind of make a recommendation to the council by December. In December, it was probably more likely in December, with the thought process is that the council would pick one. And then from that point forward, it would take us to schematic drawings to get us to a referendum in our budget, which takes place, I think this year, late April. And that would be a referendum. The other thing just to mention, and we've talked about it before, is that time is an issue here because the high school proper project is taking place. And we need to, it's not something that we can have 3 referendums or different things that happen. We have to go to referendum on a certain time frame, and it can't really, if it fails or something happens, that building comes down because the high school has to be built. So timing is very important to us, and moving along, and that's why we're meeting in the middle of August and
Yeah.
people are on vacation because we really have to move that along. So Jen, quickly, we'll just go through the survey, and Kat, you had maybe you can chime in a little bit for some of the details of it, but basically the 1928, what I'm calling proper building, got very, very high support with the community, even without a real price tag on it or a real use of it. It seems that very much that the community would like to preserve the 1928 building. Then we also asked various questions about the outlier buildings, about what we could use for recreation and things like that. And that had pretty strong support also. That's why I think that we have this second option, because I think recreation people realize that have used our programs, we don't have enough gym space, and we don't have a teen center, we don't have some different things. It did get support. It didn't get as much support as the 1928 proper, and there was some people that commented that they really want to know what the price of something like that would be before they would support it. But it definitely was not an overwhelming no, let's not do that, but it did not get as high of support for it. In the survey, one part of it is if you read it kind of quickly, there is a couple of pages of the people that have said no and like what their reasoning is with no, but you have to remember the majority of the people said yes. This is just the no section of people, but I think that's good to know, like why people would not like to do a large project. Is that correct, Kat?
Yes. And one more thing to add about this is we had a very high response rate for the survey. The company that conducted it said it was very comparable to their national polls. So there's a high level of confidence in these results.
And so that's the, I think that's the charge, high level, the statement of needs, and the survey, which was all in your packets. And really, I think we're looking for kind of what our next steps would be. We've talked as a group that we think the first next step would be that we'd have to figure out what would go into the 1928 building. And I have done a very high level survey with the departments and just said, how many closed offices do you need? How many conference rooms do you need? How many departments, how many regular closets, storage? I correct me if I'm wrong, I kind of envision me kind of giving you all that information and sending you on your way to meet with my direct reports to help us come, and I think you've called it the programming. And to me, I don't think you can come up with anything until you do that first. And then also kind of working backwards on some kind of timeline to keep us on target to meet our goals. So I'll turn it over to you, Peter, and then maybe the architects, and we'll go from there.
Okay, then, all right, so we'll go to discussion and next steps. And I want to bring this up and just have a brief discussion on this. I've been thinking about this, and one thing that I would like us to highly consider in this planning process is that we take that potentially we take the 1978 portion of the school out of this, out of Plan B, okay? Because that is, if we keep the 78 portion in this plan, it's a very large project, and the cost on that is probably going to be very large, and I don't think the town will have an appetite for it. And we're on a very short time schedule too. So I want to open up that for discussion with this group right now. If you can have a consensus, and how do you feel about eliminating the 1978 portion of this project potentially on this? I know these, I know David and Chris will need to look at it in the big picture to see how it affects the other buildings, but moving forward, I'd like to hear your thoughts on potentially moving the 1978 section out of this project.
Let me just, if I can just ask more of a question.
Yep.
What I read in the charge was to leave the 1978 building with no renovations at all, so that what I'm trying to get my arms around is obviously to put forward to the voters a plan that has the very real possibility of being approved. And it seems to me that we have two kinds of issues here. One of them is office space. And I noted from the Silver Petrocelli proposal, they've done a number of those, whether it's the Hemingway Municipal Center or other schools. It would seem that there's ample space in the 1928 building to handle that part of it. What I am confused about is there seems to be an appetite in the community for more recreational space. And the question is the 1952 building enough space to be able to accomplish that? And if there is, then the extra space in the 1978 seems to be surplus. But it still goes back to a discussion about, if we were to recommend the 1978 or 1952 with no expenses in terms of the renovation, will that still create expenses? In other words, by retaining those two buildings, will there be expenses associated with them? And if it's duplicative to have 1978 building and 1952, then I would agree with you, Peter, that I think not retaining 1978 would make sense.
Yeah, I think moving forward, there would have to be capital planning and budgeting for potentially upgrades to 78. So yeah, there will be a cost involved with it at some time in the future, where they would have to start budgeting for capital projects on that part of the building.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Jane.
One of the things, first of all, I just wanted to say that I was not here for the vote. I was stuck at the airport with millions of other people across the country, so I couldn't get on the Zoom, but I just wanted to let you know that I am on board with you working on this project, and I thank you very much for that. I think one of the important things for us to pay attention to, and for you to pay attention to, is the history of this town, which speaks directly to the 1978 building as well. Years ago, the town voted down the opportunity to purchase, I don't know if it's still called Greenbrier.
Yeah. Yep.
And, we're kind of, and then we ended up building the police station and the senior center and an addition onto the town hall and things like that. So we've kind of found ourselves in this place of needing more based on some of the things that have been voted down. So I think that that's one of the things that we want to pay attention to. The other thing is obviously the building of the new high school. If you look at the plans for the building of the new high school, and right now parking is terrible up there. And the 1978 building staying there is really going to cripple parking up there. Having said that, we also had 2 referendums on the high school. First one failed, Dan and I saw that. And there was a lot of conversation about not needing that space. Or the fact that that space could come down is a better way to put it, as we were going to build that space. I personally would like to see us take the 1978 out. I don't think that we should keep it. I think one of the reasons for keeping 1952, and what's that little one?
64.
64 is because of that boiler space. I personally, as long as I've been involved with the high school, did not realize that space was underneath 1952, 1964, and all of those areas. So there's a monetary thing to pay attention to, but also a benefit of keeping that based on what you were saying that the town needs. We are a growing town. I've heard of talks about redistricting, the gyms and things are filling up, and the security that Kathy spoke to, and after school events. But I think we're just going to have to figure that out. I think 1928, 1952, and I guess if we need 1964 based on the boiler system is the right thing to do. I don't think we should keep the 1928 personally.
Thanks.
78,
78.
28, yes.
We want the 28.
Look at all of those additions.
Yeah.
That's why we needed them. So that's my feeling. I really do believe that we need to not put
Thank
that in the price.
Thank you. Jack, anything?
A couple things. I'm kind of ambivalent about the 78, 52. If
Speak
it's
into
good.
the microphone.
Oh, yes,
Oh,
sorry.
Joe can hear you.
Because I really spent a lot of time and I vote in that building. That's all I do. So I'm really curious about how this overlays with the site plan for the high school, because I think there was a lot of work to be done, because on some of these things, you're going to be weaving through the parking lot to get to these places. And I think that's not going to be acceptable. So I think that may play a part into deciding how much of this stays and goes. Frankly, I think maybe smaller might be better. And so I kind of see where people are coming from, but I think it's part of what you're charged is to look at. And I think we'll get to that point really quick, probably. I wouldn't just immediately write it off, but I would say that, we would consider it.
Yep. Joe, anything? Any comments?
Just listening to everybody, and I do worry about future costs and capital improvements if we do keep the 78. In a perfect world, I would love to keep it, obviously, for all the use that we could have of it. But I think in today's market, with everything going on and with the new build of the school and parking lot issues, I am feeling that the 78 building should be eliminated from the scope.
Okay. No. Can you hear me? Okay, so based on what I'm hearing, I would say I have a consensus that we can potentially eliminate the 1978 portion of the building based on what they need to do with their due diligence. That's good?
We should spend the money on figuring out the 1978.
Yeah, I think that will be that would probably help part of your process, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so we have a consensus on that. Thank you. All right, do we want to go into timeline now or anything
Yeah,
else?
I think, again, if maybe Dave, if you could say about the programmatic, is that where we should be headed first?
Yeah, so the roadmap really is as we call the program, or the programmatic exercise. We need to understand the spaces as you listed here, as your ad hoc committee listed here, to size that up and see what their goals, what they currently utilize the space for, and what their future thoughts are for the space, and then test fit that in the existing, in the existing 28 building and see where that may lie. So we need to first understand the program. We understand generally, we've done probate, we've done meeting rooms, we've done these type of social services spaces. So we gotta have a good sense of the scale of it, but we want to understand the program. We're going to use that. That'll be our roadmap to move forward, to develop floor plans so we can show you sort of how that all test fits within the space. At the same time, though, as we're doing that, we are going to be looking at the site piece of it, because as you mentioned, that is an important part. And the drawings, at least that we saw on there, were somewhat diagrammatic in nature. They expressed exactly what I think your idea was, but where does entry go? Where does parking go? Where does site circulation? So we could begin to start looking at both of those sort of at a parallel approach. And then also looking at the mechanical systems, the position of where the boilers are and sort of how that ties into the structure of the rest of the building. So in terms of timeline, there's a few action items that will probably overlay in itself. But the first thing, which is probably the most important, is the program that we need to work on.
Okay.
And Peter, I was trying to think of kind of how, like a timeline for us in the town council, because one of the things that, is that we have by consensus, and we have to wait till what the architect's back, we've somewhat changed the charge of what,
Yeah.
what the council has said. And my thought would be, the thought process is that, as you remember, we've canceled the August meeting, but then there's a September meeting, the second Tuesday of the month. My thought would be is that if the architects could come back at that time with a pretty good idea on some of the programs, and also come back and say, listen, we could keep the boilers, we could do this modified, some
Yep.
basic things that then you guys could have a more formal type of action item. And then that you guys meet before the council, then Chris Fagan as a council liaison could update the council as the liaison at that.
Joey.
Joey
Oh, I'm
is
sorry, Joey. Sorry, Joey.
last term.
Joey. So Joey is the council liaison, and then update the council at that first September meeting with the thought that we were looking to potentially modify the charge a little bit. And the other thing that I think we should, and I talked to CJ, the chair, a little bit, is that because this is somewhat a fluid process, to make our charge a little broader, that if something else comes up, that we don't have to come back to the council.
Right.
that, a little
Yeah.
bit more fluid. And then the thought is that at the second September meeting, after the council was updated at the first meeting, we'd have an action item at the council updating our charge.
Charge. They would
And
update
in
the charge,
And then
right?
in the meantime, though, you'd still be working along with the 1928 proper and continuing on your path.
If I still and I was wondering about that because the charge is
Yeah,
the
the
charge,
Yeah,
for right now. And I was wondering about that, and I don't have the charge in front of me. I can't remember exactly. I mean, I do have it in
Yeah.
front of me, but so we're now looking at if we do not do the 1978, which is the consensus, we're looking at still two options. Only 1928 and figure out how we're going to handle the boiler, which I wasn't aware of was under there, or the whole thing. So we still have two things to consider.
yeah, you would get 1928,
Right.
or potentially a plan B would be potentially a modified 1952, 64, and 28,
Right,
and 1978 potentially being eliminated.
right. And then we still, well, you guys will figure that out. I'm trying to figure
And
out
I
the
think
options.
that's part of it too, is that even option 1928 could be 1928, option 1A. Because
Yeah.
you may need something.
Yeah,
else
you may
with it,
need
And that's
something
what the
else.
architects are gonna
Yeah.
talk to us
Exactly.
about. Yeah,
And I was wondering
Yeah.
exactly that.
Yeah, when they get into
right.
it.
And I think that the council in general, when they did this, they knew that we didn't know a lot of information. So I think that's when we go back to them, have some more, what works the best. I think that's what everyone's looking for.
Yeah,
The other thing that I was thinking about when we talk about timeline is we sort of have to work backwards. I mean, you're well aware of this, but as far as community involvement, we have a really smart community and a community that likes to be involved and certainly updated on every move a committee like this makes. But we get to that point before referendum where we're not allowed to do, any communicating with the community. So this very tight line is going to really impact how we communicate with the community
Right.
legally, under the
Mm.
laws. So that's something we want to pay attention to also, and I can't remember how many weeks before
I
referendum.
think
but
it's
whatever
30
that
days.
is. Um,
That would
It's a quick timeline
Yeah.
definitely-
to get community involved.
Peter, I have a question. This is the first time I've actually seen this document, which is,
Oh,
looks,
I had that copy. That's fine. I just gave it to you.
okay, well, I know, it was just sliding down this way.
From me.
I'm going to slide it backwards.
Yeah.
And it's the first time I've actually seen the rendering of the new high school, where it is and whatever. And I know there was a discussion at an earlier meeting regarding the relocation of the ball field. Because at least in looking at the 1964 and 1952 buildings, they're not shown on here and they are right where the home plate might be. Could you just bring us up to date on Kathy on what the discussions have been and how that ball field would be relocated to accommodate the 1964 and or 1952 buildings?
So throughout the value engineering process on the new high school, because every time we finish a design phase, we had to go get an estimate. The estimate came in over due to escalation, et cetera. So they value engineer to take things out. Currently, the ball field is an alternate. So what that means is it is not going in the base bid, there is no ball field. It would be a green field. And if bids are favorable, then the ball field could be brought in. Now, part of that decision was because there is uncertainty about what is remaining with this building, with this project, potentially the gym space and all of that. So the building committee, the high school building committee wanted a level of flexibility on the site. So they made it an alternate. And then that way, if more is retained, you're not losing the field then. It's kind of been planned out. Another alternate that they did was more of a deduct or a credit back to them, because currently the plan calls for demolition of all of the additions except the 1928 building. So if more was retained, we would get pricing up front for what that cost would be to not demolish the entire building.
I understand that. I'm just wondering where the tennis courts and ball field's going to go. I mean, it doesn't seem to me to be a viable option to have a high school without a baseball field there.
Could go to the meeting.
Right. A lot
Tungus
of them are played, like the varsity and all of that is played at Tungus Mead. That was not an easy decision by the committee by any means. But it was also, rather than taking a lot of things from inside the building and allowing for the flexibility of the 1928 committee and potential retaining of more, they felt it was the best decision.
You have something, Russ?
I did, but I forget now. I'll defer for right now.
Okay. All right, what's our next step now?
I think the only thing that we still have to talk about is that we wanted to talk about communications a little bit, and that the
Right.
thought is that we would probably want to get something out in September when people are back. And Peter, you and I spoke that if any of the group wanted to become part of a communication committee with the staff, and then like the timing, do we want to wait until what we've come, like even changing this option? I think that's something that the community may want to know. So maybe it'd be a little bit later in September, but regardless, we need to start getting a communication group together the thought would be putting out either a newsletter, a one-page newsletter with sometime in September.
I would love to
Okay.
be a part of that.
I'll just ask here, I know Jean's expressed interest in it. Would there be any other members who potentially want to be on this subcommittee for communication? Joe, possibly.
I'd be willing to discuss it.
Okay.
Goodness, like leaving me hanging here.
Yeah. Okay, well, at least initially for now, let's go with Jean and Dan.
Okay.
And if other members want to participate,
Right.
it's
Yep.
more the merrier.
More the merrier.
One of the things that I've been thinking about is exactly the questions Dan just had. How we're going to.
Yeah,
join
I
high school.
I haven't seen that map, and
I don't know.
when
what
I
it is.
heard about the baseball field, I was like, oh God, I got a little knot in my stomach. I said, oh geez, now how I don't want to conflict with the news project.
Yeah.
And it's
No, I don't want to take anything away from that.
I mean, I'm a great supporter of athletics at Farmington, and I've been at many, many high schools in the greater Hartford area over the years when my son was here and played sports. And I want to give the athletes here the best facilities possible. I want to give the parents the greatest opportunity to see their kids play.
Yep.
I'm very proud of Tungus Mead. I've had my kids played there. I understand it, but it's not a facility right on the campus, but we're constrained. This is what the voters approved. And I think we have to, regarding the high school, I want to make sure that whatever we propose as a committee gets approved by the town, but actually does what we need it to do in terms of the space going forward. So
We do have that week. Chris is on.
Yes.
Okay.
Chris is the liaison to the high school building committee. So on their agenda, there's a standing 1928 update because, you know, the committees are separate, but they're also very much intertwined.
Right.
What we do impacts them and what they do impacts us. So we felt it was important to have a dedicated liaison.
yeah, well, I'm looking forward to having the architects come back with some plans.
Mhm.
I was impressed with their renovation of a number of municipal buildings. And I'm sure you have the skill sets and the expertise. When I walk through the old Hall High School and see how that was repurposed in West Hartford and what can be done, that's a very large facility as a town hall, but they repurposed it. They repurposed the old gym. It's a community center. Actually, they have meetings in the old basketball gym that's there. So I know things can be done here with that building that will be helpful to the town and will have a very positive long-term impact for the community. And we need to sell that to the community for them to understand that they're doing this not for themselves now, but for future generations that will come after us.
Kathy, Kat, anything else that we need to discuss for David and Chris? And we'll say agenda item D in that area.
No. I don't
Okay.
think so.
All right. How about agenda item E, other business?
Oh, I think just to recap that the architects will start working with myself and my staff to start doing the programs. They are going to also start looking at a modified option for us and then also on the path of doing the 1928,
Mhm.
getting that ready to go. And then we'll be looking for the first September meeting to be looking at some, you know, we have a time frame, so we should be moving quickly. And then with that thought that at the council meeting at the end of September, that the council would change the charge.
Charge.
And also, in the meantime, Kat will talk to Jean and Dan about some of the topics that we want to get on the communication, so we can start putting together the communication newsletter.
That would be great. Can we just review real quickly, not review, but our August 23rd is canceled.
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 The September 13th, is that when the council will be discussing our,
So that the thought would be, we meet on September
that.
13th, and then the council meets, and that's when Joey would be giving an update, because we'll, at this meeting, we'll look at things that the architects have brought back to us, but we can't do it and then give it to the council that
Right,
night. So
right.
then the thought is that on the September 27th, the council meets on that night too.
Yep.
We would be, the committee would be making some action items here for
Okay.
the September 27th meeting for the town council.
thank you.
Okay. Anything else, anyone?
One more thing.
Sure.
I always have one more thing. I think what might be interesting, and you guys probably already know this, so, but I wonder if we don't need to be so pat in keeping all of the 1952 building, or what if there's some sort of, it doesn't have to be, you know, one of these colors, that there may be part of it, and I haven't gone through the building and looked at it, you know, super closely, but I would guess that you and your team, that might be something to consider, that it may, we don't have to keep the whole color.
Right.
That's great.
I just want to know that the 1952 building, the gym, whatever is in there, is going to be sufficient in size and scope
Yeah.
to be able to accommodate the recreational needs that people say, well, I mean, you got rid of the really good gym and you gave us the old gym. The old gym isn't regulation size. It doesn't do this. It doesn't do that. So we need to have whatever the talking points are, that will convince the community that while it's the old gym, it's still sufficient
Sufficient.
in size, scope, to be able to provide the recreational, needs that the community is looking for.
And cost effective because of the boiler.
Yes, and cost effective,
Right.
especially cost effective.
But that's a good point.
Okay, Russ, you remembered?
Did I come back to life here?
No, yeah.
So with the 1928 building, everyone know the boiler is outside of the
Correct.
building, the side, the building proper itself. Going forward, as far as what the community would, not that I'm trying to be non-transparent, but to me, depending, with the new boiler systems and things like that, energy efficiency, depending on what we need for sizing for that space, and I agree with you, Jack, we may not need all of the gold 1952, but you're gonna need boiler, air, AC units, whatever, to heat and cool that whole entire space, whatever we're left with, including the 3 floors. If we take off the whole gold piece and leave the 28, I would think that we could look at the 28 building would include that space underneath the principal's office as
Right.
part of that project. So we wouldn't, if we ended up with just the 28 building as the final project, we would still have that space under the office of the principal's office for the boiler, all our utility work in there. So our diagram would change slightly for what that project would end up being.
Correct. And the elevator is also sort of tethered to that. So
Exactly.
that may
Drive.
that may drive the position of this demarcation line, as
Yeah.
you're saying, to that. So it's not, although this is just diagrammatic, that line may change in terms of what you keep,
Exactly. And I just want
because they're so connected.
correct. And I just want to make sure that we're all open to.
Yeah.
Not necessarily looking like Jack said, so the gold color.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Green color, the green 28 building may expand a little bit for our final project as a question going to the town.
I agree. We get kind of fixated on that color,
Exactly.
on that map of the building. But I think this is going to be a natural progression once these guys start getting into the bones of the building and seeing what our real options are. And that goes back to how option 1 and 2 are going to be kind of flowing. There's going to be options updated, who the hell knows, every other week or something for all we know.
I
So,
just wanted to make sure that we're all
yeah,
on the same.
Good
page,
point.
That
yeah, that's a really good
demarcation line
point.
may vary slightly.
Yep.
So when people are talking about just the 1928 building, as a committee, we're not locked into the green building. It's the
Right.
green box, and that's all
Right.
we're locked into. That's
Yeah.
all I was trying to portray.
no, that's a good
Yeah.
point. I find myself getting fixated on
I do too.
on the map, so
Right.
to speak. So. All right, anything else?
One thing I would like the architects to consider is flex space within the space itself so that you can expand and contract rooms. That's what I remember from the first building committee for the high school, that the architects had proposed a lot of different flex space so that you could accommodate the variety of needs of the community. So if you needed a larger space, you could make it larger. If you wanted breakout rooms, you could make it breakout rooms. So I'm sure this is not your first look-see at something like that. So that would be important to me to see some options.
Okay. All right, on that note, then I'll ask for a motion for adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
I need a second.
Second.
All those in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we're adjourned the 1928 building on August 9th, 2022.